which is in two, front and back, page 1 and page 2. And you've got a strip down the left because of the difference between A4 over in Europe and 8.5 by 11 here in the United States. That's the explanation of that strip. So A4 has to be compressed, but as you compress it downwards, you also compress it inwards. So there's a margin which you can scribble some notes to the left. Prometheus. You may remember Prometheus. Is it running? Okay, good, well done. Prometheus was the Greek god who stole fire from heaven to give it to human beings. He's a revolutionary figure for that reason. And Father Calderon, who put together the book, which is behind this is a 2 times A4 summary of a book of 320 pages. So you've got 320 pages worth on 2 sides of one sheet. So it's somewhat compressed. It's probably not the best compression possible, but with luck, it will give you a good idea, or an idea, if not a good idea, of what the book is about. The book is about the problem of Vatican II. Prometheus, the modernists, stole the Catholic religion from heaven and trashed it down on earth. That's why he says Prometheus, the religion of man. And the heart of the matter, the absolute heart of Vatican II, is that you're replacing the religion of God with the religion of man. So you're taking what belongs to God and giving it to man. That's Prometheus, the religion of man. Father Alvaro Calderon, he is a professor of theology and has been professor of theology for many years at the Society's Seminary in South America, in La Reja in Argentina. He's probably, I think, the best theologian in the society. He's Thomist, he's soaked in Thomas Aquinas, and he knows Thomas, and he's making a Thomistic analysis of the problem of Vatican II. Lots and lots and lots of Catholics, not all of them of course, but lots of Catholics are well aware that the church has been completely changed from the church to the new church. They don't understand how it's done, but they know very well that it's done. Calderon shows how it's done. And to understand how something is done is always a good leg up on grasping that it's been done. You might let yourself be kidded by some of these false theologians that Vatican II is really what the world needs, or that Pope Francis is doing a good job, or that Bishop Foley is absolutely right to be switching the society from Archbishop Lefebvre to Pope Francis. You might let yourself be persuaded, but if you grasp Father Calderon, you'll see that no, there's no way. There's no way. And for Bishop Foley to have switched the society, which was formed to resist Vatican II, to stand up to Vatican II, in order to defend the faith and save souls, when Bishop Foley switches that, as he has switched it, it's his main responsibility but he's one of a gang. He's not the only one. He's one of a gang. He's the leader of a gang. And that gang has switch-sold the traditionalists following the Society of St. Pius X, and is doing it day by day. The process is going on and on to get rid of Archbishop Lefebvre and to change over change over to the council. It's terrible. And with luck, once you grasp what Father Calderon has to say, you will say, never again, like some other people say. Never again. It's not possible to want to associate with the conciliarists in Rome. But the council is now, 40 years away, 50 years away, almost 50 years away, and it's ancient history, people forget it. The society priests are no longer talking about it as they used to. And therefore, the society continues day by day to be switched over to delinquency, to apostasy. Vatican II is apostasy. That's a man falling away from the true religion. Apostasis, standing away, literally in Greek. Okay, have a look at the sheet you have in front of you. It's on 2 sides. The book is in 4 parts. So you've got it there, the 4 parts are in black. On side 1, you've got a little figure 1 top right of the sheet 1, and then it's a 2 top left of the second sheet. So you should be able to find top sheet 1 and sheet 2 without too much difficulty. Sheet 1, you've got there the 4 parts in black. The first part is down most of the first page, and it's called the nature of Vatican II. Move right over to the left. Right over to the left. And there you've got Vatican II opposite the middle of the big bracket, and above is the being of Vatican II, and below is the action of Vatican II. That's a classic philosophic distinction between agery and esse, between being and action. And action follows being. What a thing does will follow what it is. If he is a Chinaman, he's going to talk like a Chinaman, think like a Chinaman, etc., etc. So if it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, it is a duck. Good American common sense. That's action follows being. If it walks, talks, and quacks, that's action, then it is a duck. So Father Calderon analyzes first what Vatican II was, its being. And then he analyzes its action in the part 2, part 3, and part 4. He analyzes the actions, firstly, the new man. Secondly, the part 3, second part of action, is the new church. And part 4, the last part of the book, is the new religion. You can see that clearly at the bottom of sheet 1. If you turn over to sheet 2, what you've then got is the Vatican II in action, and you've got part 3, which is the longest part of all, very interesting, about the new church. And then you've got the conclusion, what's like the conclusion, the new religion, part 4. So turn back to sheet 1, and at the bottom of sheet 1 you've got a little sort of diagram, bottom right. You've got there in black 2, 3, and 4, and then underneath you've got the bricks, the walls, and the building. With bricks you make a wall, with walls you make a building. With new men you make a new church, and with a new church you make a new religion. So the man is analysed firstly, because he's like the bricks. The walls are analysed secondly, because that's like the church. And then the conclusion is the new building, that's the new religion. And it is a new religion. It's nothing less than a new religion. Let me call them the bar stewards. The bar stewards who created Vatican II, to this day, are still disguising it as the same as the old religion. They're still trying to pretend that there's been no change between the church before the council and the church after the council. Absolutely wrong. It's a complete new religion. The only thing is that the new religion doesn't immediately, in all places, completely replace the old religion. So what you've got is the healthy apple rotting slowly, or rotting steadily. Just like you now have what was once the healthy apple of the society, rotting steadily. But it's not all yet completely rotten. That's an exaggeration which is not true. People still, to this day, and especially today, somebody on the internet just said, who was it? The colleague of Dr. Marshall Taylor, or a number of these people appearing on the internet on the question, Michael Voris, Michael Matt, they're not perfect, if you like. Okay, they're not perfect. But if you go into the grocers, not everything in the grocers is perfect. It's your business and my business to find what's good and to take that home and to leave what's not so good behind in the grocer's shop. When Michael Voris is opening his eyes to a number of things. I think he's commenting very well on what's going on in Rome today with the Amazon Synod. Michael Matt is not perfect, but he's sharpening his knives to what's going on. And Marshall Taylor, his colleague, the one he appears with, said, today a lot of Catholics are opening their eyes So again, it's another reason to understand why Vatican II is no good, because you can then explain to other people. And many, you may be, all of you, apostles more or less. Look out for Catholics who are on the brink of quitting the church altogether, or quitting the faith altogether. That's very serious, to quit the faith. But, it is a new religion, no less. Okay, it's the religion of man. Again, that's in the title. And then you've got the name at the very top of the first sheet, in green, Father Alvaro Calderon. That's the Argentinian, who's a very good brain and a very good Thomist. He doesn't always write completely clearly. Sometimes you have to, his original book takes some deciphering, but it's well worth deciphering. Okay, we start with the nature of Vatican II, the part one, the being of Vatican, what it was. And like a good Thomist, that's a follower of St. Thomas Aquinas, he it starts with a definition. What are we talking about? Actually, in his definition, he's announcing his conclusion. So we know where we're going. Where we're going is in three parts. The definition's in green, and then you've got three parts. Humanism disguised official. We'll come back. But when you're analysing what a thing is, the definition, and then the scholastics will analyze by the four causes. The four causes were discovered by Aristotle. They were not St. Thomas who invented the four causes. St. Thomas took over a lot of Aristotle, who was a pagan philosopher. So not all pagans are rotten. He was a pagan before Christ, which means that he was not an apostate, because he couldn't fall away from Christ who had not yet taken flesh. Aristotle was 300 years before Christ. But Aristotle analysed and understood nature, the things of nature, reality all around us. He was very real. He was so real that he would make mistakes from analysing reality. For instance, he said nothing comes from nothing. But he made an exception for spontaneous generation. Why? Because on rotting meat, he saw maggots appearing. He said that there were no maggots on the meat originally. Now maggots are appearing. They've come from nowhere. So he made an exception. Then the very sensible principle, nothing comes from nothing. In that very sensible principle, he made an exception simply because of what he observed. In other words, Aristotle stuck to what he observed, what he saw. He stuck to reality. A modern philosopher shuts his eyes, shuts his ears, and then begins to fantasize about reality. Modern philosophy is stupid. It's as French would say, it's as stupid as its feet. And poor parents today are persuaded to spend tens of thousands of pounds to send their children to these wretched universities, which ruin the children's faith and their common sense. These modern universities mock common sense, which is dreadful. Common sense is common sense, and it's reliable. It's pretty darn reliable common sense. It's a great shame when somebody loses his common sense. Okay, so four causes, and then special properties. They're not the only properties, but he signals special properties of Vatican II. So that's another way of getting at what it is. It was specially optimistic, it's specially inclusivist, and it's specially keen on novelty. So those are qualities or properties of Vatican II. So you've got definition, four causes and properties to tell what Vatican II was. Definition in three parts. It's a humanism, that's the key. But it's disguised as Catholicism. And then it's imposed by the officials of the church. It's put together by the officials of the church, which gives it a great prestige, and then it was actually imposed, viciously imposed by Paul VI. Paul VI was a delinquent, an absolute villain. Consciously, unconsciously, God knows. But judging by the fruits, he did his best to destroy the Catholic Church. Again, be careful, the apple was not completely rotten. There were moments when he said something true, and there were moments when he cried. He cried, for instance, over the lack of vocations or the loss of priests. He was mainly responsible for it. He couldn't see it. It was his fault. But there you are. So, definition for the humanism. I read in blue, the little text in blue. Vatican II is the last in a series of glorifications of man. A humanism is something which is up for humans and which says humans are good and humans are the best and God can take second place. So the Protestantism was a first humanism. Man freeing himself from God, freeing himself from the shackles of the Catholic Church, protesting Protestants. Second humanism might have been the French Revolution, 1789, which was again liberals, the French revolutionaries throwing off the throne and the altar, cutting off the head of the king and trying to get rid of the church. They didn't succeed then, but they succeeded with Vatican II, virtually. Of course, it's impossible for God's church to be destroyed. It's not possible. But men can do a good job of trying. And that was the French Revolution. So they cut off the king's head. They would have cut off all the priest's heads if they could have. They couldn't. But they'd have done so. So the the French Revolution is second humanism. A third humanism would be the liberal Catholicism of the 19th century. And then a fourth humanism would be modernism at the beginning of the 19th century. I'm sorry. Liberal Catholicism through the 19th century, that's right. Modernism at the beginning of the 20th century. And then Vatican II is neo-modernism or a rerun of modernism at the middle of the 20th century. So all of these are glorifying man and getting rid of God, pushing God into second place, pushing him away where he's nothing. If God is not first, he's nothing. So men, by pushing man first, make God second and make God nothing. Vatican II is the last in a series of glorifications of man, but this time supposedly Catholic. In the previous cases, it was clearly not Catholic. Protestantism was not Catholic, was anti-Catholic, was protesting against Catholicism. The French Revolution was not Catholic. They would have destroyed the church if it could have done. Liberal Catholicism is more subtle, but it's still of the 19th century. It's not Catholic because it's working to compromise with the French Revolution. Liberal Catholicism was an attempt to combine the liberalism of the French Revolution with the Catholicism of the church. And like any compromise with the church, compromises don't work. You take oil and water, you put some oil and water in the same bottle, you shake the bottle furiously. Once you stop shaking it, for a moment the oil and the water stay separate, but almost immediately the oil floats to the top because it's lighter than water, and the water falls to the... They can't stay together. Oil and water will always separate. Same with Catholicism and liberalism, same as Catholicism and any compromise. It's taken a while since Vatican II for Catholics to grasp that the Vatican II was not Catholic, but they're getting it now. With Pope Francis, who is a fruit of Vatican II, many Catholics are now understanding there's something seriously wrong with Vatican II. For a long time they've been fooled. For a long time they've been made to think by the officials of the church. That's what's so grave. This is a revolution from inside the church. Protestantism was soon outside the church. Liberalism was the revolutionaries of France were outside the church. Liberal Catholicism began this process of the revolutionists being inside the church, disguising themselves, and this disguising of anti-God as though it's pro-God reached its climax with Vatican II. So this glorification of man was supposedly Catholic because it was voted on by 2,000 bishops. That's a lot of churchmen, a lot of wisdom. It should have been a lot of wisdom, but they came up with a dud. 2,000 bishops, and it was imposed on the church by 2 popes, especially Paul VI. He arm wrestled with the church, with the Catholics, to smash them, and to smash the old church. Terrible. Because he was so convinced that his new church was going to be better. That's how the devil can fool the highest of churchmen. So our Lord said, beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. And Paul VI had a lot of people fooled for a long time because he was himself convinced. There's nothing like somebody convinced himself to convince others. And Paul VI was convinced. So he smashed the old church in order to replace it with the new church. We move on to the four causes, and you've got in very light green, you can see opposite final you've got to sit on, opposite material you've got wood, opposite efficient you've got carpenter, and opposite formal you've got a chair. The four causes discovered by Aristotle are final, material, efficient and formal. And to remind you what all of those stand for, the final cause is the purpose or end, finis. Finis. We've got finish in English, to finish something. So final is the end that you're going towards, and which you suit your means to achieve the end, meaning the purpose, the end purpose. So that's the final cause. The material cause is easy. That's the material out of which you make whatever it is you're making. The material, like wood for a chair. The chair is to sit on. Some people say, we haven't got enough chairs, there's not enough things for us to sit on. We need a carpenter to make out of wood a chair for people to sit on. There you've got the four causes. So the purpose to sit on, the material out of which it's going to be made is wood. The efficient cause, the one who's going to effect it, make it, is the carpenter. And finally, the formal cause is what you've actually got, what forms the thing to be what it is by the time you finish making it. And that in this case is a chair. Okay, what are these four causes applied to Vatican II? We've got the end, the means, the grave error in blue. First, the end. The purpose of Vatican II was to promote human dignity. I don't know if you realise by now, but the moment you hear human dignity, you want to run a mile. The red lights are already winking. Human dignity. In other words, what a big shot men are. Well, we have got original sin. We are not such big shots as we're liable to think. To promote human dignity, but without degrading God. So it's going to be a new humanism, unlike the four that came before it. It's going to be a new humanism which is going to glorify man and glorify God. We'll see how it's done. So, unlike all humanist humanisms, since the supposedly excessively God-centered Middle Ages, the idea is this. In the Middle Ages, man was very Catholic, the church was queen of civilization, and it was all fine and dandy. But actually, the church was too hard on men. This poverty, chastity, obedience, it's a bit much. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour some water in the wine of the Middle Ages. So we're going to make a humanism, but this time it's not going to be a humanism that absolutely rejects the smashing of the church. It's going to be a humanism that makes the church tag along with. So it's going to be a humanism that pulls God along with. So it's going to be humanism as a Catholic. That's a contradiction in terms. Humanism is man-centered, God is God-centered. That's the heart of the problem of Vatican II. So, you've got, without degrading God, as all the previous humanisms did, because they were reacting against the Middle Ages, which are supposedly excessively God-centered. The Middle Ages were too centered on God. That's what provoked the humanisms previously. They went too far in the opposite direction. What we want is a new humanism which is going to balance God and man. So we're going to dignify man, but we're going to at the same time glorify God. We'll see how it's done, I say. So, means, how do you get to that end? Man being the supreme creature of God, then if we put man in the center, we will also give glory to God. So if we make a man-centered humanism, but remind everybody that man comes from God, well, then we're going to glorify God at the same time. So that's the sort of the conjuring trick by which to make a Catholic humanism. Grave error. But only God can be the central purpose of both God and man. God cannot have any other purpose in creating than God. Why? Because God is changeless. God cannot change. But if God begins to want something that he didn't want before, he's changing. He's changing in his will. If God learns something which he didn't know before, he's changing in his knowledge. That's why we say why we are sure God is omniscient or all-knowing. God knows everything because he cannot learn anything, because to learn something he would have to change. And God is changeless. Therefore, from eternity, God knew your name and mine. He knew all our names. He knew all that would happen to us from birth until death. Does that mean we haven't got free will? No, no, no. We've got free will. His knowledge does not take away our free will. But he does know everything, absolutely everything. Similarly, he wills everything. Everything that he wants, and he wants the will of God, he wants a lot of things. But everything that he wants, he must have wanted from eternity. Otherwise he would have changed when he began wanting it. Or he would change if he gave up wanting it. Therefore, whatever God, the only thing that God wants, the only thing that God can want, the only thing that can be the purpose of what God does want is himself. And it's in one single act of willing, of wanting everything, that he includes all of the details of that he includes all the things that he wants, all the details that he wants. And he never began wanting. His act of wanting is co-eternal with him. It's identical with him. It is him. Otherwise he would be receiving from outside. Why can't he receive knowledge from outside? Why can't he begin willing something outside him? Why can't he begin willing something outside him? Because he would then be perfectible. By willing something he didn't will previously, he would be gaining a perfection. By learning something he didn't learn previously, like say Pythagoras, the theorem of Pythagoras, he would be gaining a perfection. Any of us, by learning and understanding the theorem of Pythagoras, gains a perfection. God is not perfectible. God is perfect. He can't be perfected. He can't be changed and he can't be perfected. Therefore, he cannot start willing. The only thing that he can will is himself. He is himself, he wills himself, he knows himself. By knowing himself, he knows everything in all of his creation.